Good afternoon, everyone. We really appreciate your patience. We know it's been a long day, but we're going to try to give you a very informative panel here at the end of the day. The title of this panel is called, At the End of the Day, People Need Jobs. Second Chance Hiring Makes Dollars and Cents for Employers. My name is Micheal Taylor. I represent an organization called Center for Employment Opportunities. We provide immediate, effective, and comprehensive employment opportunities for men and women returning from incarceration. We know that employment is very important. It is just a stabilizer. It is not the end-all, be-all. With that being said, we want to talk a little bit about reentry employment and how we can work better with employers, but more importantly, hearing it from employers' perspectives. So with that being said, I've introduced myself, but now I want to give my wonderful panelists an opportunity to introduce themselves. I'll pass it to Natasha, and then you just keep it passing.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Natasha DiFiore, and I am Senior Director and Counsel on the Public Policy team at Metro Atlanta Chamber. I'm also a Georgia Justice Project alumna, so happy to be here in that capacity as well. And we have worked with Georgia Justice Project on second chances initiatives at the Capitol since 2020 and continue to do so. So this is something that we care about from a talent perspective, from the perspective that it's just the right thing to do, and I am happy to be here today.
Hi, everybody. My name is Daniel Stinson. I lead a talent acquisition and recruiting business called Diversity Insight Staffing that intentionally recruits and employs men and women with criminal backgrounds. I got into this business because I used to live in Capitol View, just down the street from here. I became really good friends with a lot of my neighbors. And at the time, I was a recruiter for a staffing agency. And so my friends would ask me, hey, can you help me get a job? That's what you do, right? And the first answer was no. My boss at the time was not particularly open to the idea. But I like to say without telling him, I got one of my friends a job. And to this day, he was the best placement I've ever made. Hardest worker, best attitude, most commitment. Literally, the hiring manager afterwards said, if you have any more of him, please send him my way. He's incredible. Turned into a week-long job, turned into a full-time job, and now he's even got a pension and working for the city. And so that inspired me, one, because he was awesome, but my second thought was, he's probably not the only one, right? There's probably other people like him that if you give them the opportunity, they're going to make the most of it. And that's a business, right? Here's the demographic that people often exclude or put barriers in front of, but businesses are desperate for good talent right now, just good attitudes, working hard, showing up on time, and they're desperate for people like that. And so there's an opportunity to match these up, and it's been a lot of fun to be in this line of work.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rachel Shanklin. I'm the Georgia Director for Small Business Majority. We are a small business advocacy organization that is really dedicated on uplifting and amplifying the diverse voices of small business owners. In the past, we found that there has been no resources or advocacy when it comes to folks who have been historically underserved and underrepresented, especially when it comes to policies that impact the smallest businesses. So majority of the folks in our network, 2/3 are people of color and 2/3 are women. So really advocating for equitable policies and systems that benefit all entrepreneurs, not just the small businesses that have 200 employees, but really those micro enterprises, solo entrepreneurs, gig workers, family service-based childcare providers, food truck owners, folks that sometimes go under the radars, especially when right over across the street at the state capitol, oftentimes bigger business voices are advocating on behalf of small businesses, but as you all know, sometimes they're missing the mark. So what we do at Small Business Majority is advocate for equitable public policy solutions and also educating businesses on how those policies impact them. So for example, right now in the Georgia legislature, there are actually 2 bills happening around expungement and occupational licensing. So we are doing our best to advocate and really provide a alternative perspective of what the true voice of small businesses mean, and not just, to be frank, not white businesses, but Black-owned, Hispanic-owned, folks that have historically been left out of the conversation when policies are being passed. So we cover the entire state, but really trying to provide that alternative perspective that second chance hiring and criminal justice reform is good for small businesses, especially for justice impacted folks that are coming back to their communities, looking for a job, looking for that secure employment when they come back to really make a difference in their communities. So really excited to be here with you all.
I don't know if I can go behind her. My name is Robert Stewart, and I see many familiar faces in the community. I can't call your name, but over the course of the past few years, I have worked for a number of different companies in a human resources capacity. My current role is a human resource manager for a distribution center for Walmart. And prior to that, I worked for a company called Fastenal. Prior to that, UPS. And what really helped fuel the passion that I have now, prior to that, I worked for the Urban League of Greater Atlanta in a capacity directly assisting returning citizens to get on their feet directly. So I have some very grassroots, first level experience in that space. When I left that space, I carried what I learned into my subsequent roles to always have an eye out for any individuals who are returning citizens. I'll leave it there. I know Michael has a number of different questions, but I just want to share information that can help the returning citizen when they're looking for a job and to leverage what they know, what they can learn from the panel.
You can keep the mic, Robert. Normally I don't do this, but I'm gonna start with gentlemen's first. With that being said, Daniel and Robert, can you tell me a little about what has been your experience hiring people with criminal records from the employee perspective, as well as getting companies to change their minds about hiring justice impacted individuals?
So I'm going to yield to Daniel first, but because he has a niche in this space. And when I share my information, I think it is going to be more broad because I'm working from the corporate space.
Yeah, so I started this business back in late 2018, beginning 2019, so a couple years old now. And the first thing I'll say was I overestimated employers' willingness to embrace this line of work. So I will admit that we still have work to do. The good news is a lot of progress has been made in that time, in the last 4+ years, particularly. After 2020, more and more businesses are open to diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. And so I've seen a significant uptick in just willingness. Just heard about the Metro Atlanta Chambers involved now. SHRM, the Society for HR Managers, they've got a second chance hiring program. So the good news is there's a lot of positive things happening. So to answer your second question first, and what's necessary, well, one, it's advocacy. It's continued and constant advocacy in a way that touches hearts and minds, right? So there are a lot of statistics out there that show that men and women with criminal backgrounds are not likely at all to commit a crime at the workplace and actually more likely to have longer tenure and even be more productive in the workplace. So the data and the statistics are out there, but really it's hearts and stories are what get people to change their minds. And so I think it's just continued advocacy and telling these stories and getting more and more storytellers, particularly connecting with hiring managers and HR managers in particular. First question was around my experience hiring. So, still doing it 4 years later. So very positive for me. Again, my background was as a recruiter. The hardest thing to do in recruiting is finding hardworking, dependable, loyal talent. It's very difficult to do, no matter where you're recruiting from. And in my time, I found, on average, working with folks with criminal backgrounds, they are more likely than folks that without backgrounds to actually have all of those positive qualities. And so kind of my line of work, when I'm trying to convince an employer to become fair chance friendly, I talk about what has someone done since they made that mistake. We all make mistakes, right? You've made a mistake. You've made a mistake. We've all made mistakes. Okay, so what has that person done since that time? If there's a track record and now also people in their lives who can speak to the actions and decisions and behaviors that they've made. Well, now you actually have way more information on a candidate versus someone who just came in through Indeed.com, and you don't know anything. And so it's actually a safer decision for the employers to make because you have more information. So, speaking to candidates that have a criminal background, I would say make sure you have documented efforts. Like, what are your efforts? And document it, and make sure you have people in your life who can speak to it. So whether mentors, bosses, different programming that you're in, I think that is the best way to impress potential employers.
I totally agree with everything he just shared. I want to go to more of a granular level. You're the returning citizen. So my experience has been, you're the returning citizen. You come in and you apply for a job and you say, you know what, I've changed my life. I've done these things. I just wanted to let you know that I have a background. Okay. I'm going to say something that may be very controversial, may be against the norm, but I'm speaking to you from experience. You shouldn't do that. You apply for the job just like everyone else. That's the experience. In my role, I don't look at your criminal background. In my role, I do not look at your criminal background because it's not released to me. And I'm the the senior human resource manager for my site. We have an associate vetting team at our headquarters who do not release your information to me. Eligible, ineligible, decisional. If it's decisional, then I can look at it in one of my prior roles. I can look at it and I can make a decision. Now, the reason why I say that, and I want to be very, very succinct and to the point. The reason why I say that is that you shouldn't, is because the determination on whether or not you're employable as it relates to your background, 9 times out of 10 with a larger company is not made by the person you're talking to. And you've just shot yourself in the foot because they can deny you for other reasons that they can deny you because of that, but they won't tell me as the HR manager, hey, I denied that person because they have a background. So that's my experience with that. You can ask me more details later because I know there's a lot of questions we want to get through. In my prior roles, I have had the experience of convincing one employer in particular, to open their eyes, open their hearts to individual with a background. And my experience has been with UPS, Fastenal, that I have hired individuals that have been incarcerated and they have excelled. The young lady that spoke on the last panel, that sat right here, she spoke to when she was released how she was moving past everyone who were free. It's because she wasn't taking anything for granted. She knew what it felt like to not be able to do it. And that is seen within the employment realms with individuals who have criminal backgrounds. They tend to be a lot more dependable. That's been my experience.
Thank you, Robert. Give it to Rachel. So Daniel, you made a great point earlier about policy. So I want to bring policy reform into the conversation. With that being said, Rachel, the small business majority recently conducted a survey among Georgia's small businesses owners and found that there was a lot of support for justice reform measures. Can you tell us a little bit about those key findings?
Yes, thank you. I'm actually very excited about this poll. I think this was like in our previous notes. I don't know if you're going to hit on this later, but who in here has heard Georgia's the #1 for business? Has anybody heard that? I see some hands. So we're actually the 37th in economic mobility. Just want to give that fun fact out. That was research done by the Anna E. Casey Foundation, if you want to cite me. But we did a survey this year in 2023, really trying to understand what do small businesses feel about criminal justice reform and second chance hiring, because We know there's a lot of misinformation. We know there's a lot of stigma. And as we all have been talking about on this panel, there's current workforce shortages. So our recent survey, just some highlights here, revealed that 54% of small businesses in Georgia are having difficulty finding quality candidates. Nearly half of that say that candidates are also expecting higher pay. Recent research reports that there are approximately 11 million open jobs in Georgia right now. So when we think about the impact and change in the law that there would be on the ability to hire qualified individuals, 85% of small businesses in Georgia support reforms that would allow people with old convictions fairer access to occupational licenses. In addition, more than 7 in 10 respondents support proposals to end debt-based driver license suspensions for unpaid fines and fees, which we know is a problem within itself. Small businesses are still trying to navigate the supply chain and workforce shortages, so hiring justice impacted people to help mitigate these problems only makes sense. Though often overlooked to persistent stigma, second chance hiring opens an enormous untapped talent pool for small employers. Small business owners within our network, as I mentioned, 2/3 women, 2/3 people of color, have shared their own personal and positive experiences with second chance hiring, and they often corroborate that justice impacted individuals have contributed positively to the work environment and notably lower turnover rates. So those are some highlights from our polling. As I mentioned, we are doing some advocacy at the state capitol, sharing these numbers with policymakers and state leaders to really shift the narrative about what this means for the small business community and folks that have been justice impacted looking for work.
Thank you, Rachel. And you can pass the mic to Natasha. This next question is for her. Why is it important for organizations like the Metro Atlanta Chamber of Commerce to decide to support policy change?
So Metro Atlanta Chamber has been a voice at the Capitol for a long time, and on certain issues, right? Economic development, tax, those are the type of issues you would think of. So when the Chamber decided to get involved in Second Chances work, we were able to use the goodwill that's been built from all the years working on business policy issues to explain why second chances are so important to talent development. So there is that hook of talent development, but it's important because if you're an organization that represents the Metro Atlanta business community, which does have a lot of sway, for better or for worse, at the Capitol, it's a good idea to be able to harness that collective voice for the greater good when it's something like second chances that I found when you can bring very different voices to the table and say, we all believe that this needs to be done, the collective voice gets louder, more people listen, and you start to see bills getting passed, as was done 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023. The bigger the coalition got, the more bills favoring second chances ended up getting passed. So for me, it's all about, and for the Chamber, it's the collective voice. It's all of the talent issues that Rachel spoke about. And frankly, it's the right thing to do because people need jobs, and fair chance hiring is a way to reduce barriers to people getting jobs and employers filling those jobs.
Thank you. So this next question could be answered by Daniel, Rachel, or Robert. If you are met with resistance with your company, what data or what messages do you use to make your business case on how second chance hiring helps their company economically and with their workforce shortages?
I have a go-to study I've been using for a while now. It's from Northwestern University, so a very reputable place. I had a research study, several years old now, but the synopsis was people with criminal backgrounds are just as likely as someone without a criminal background to commit a crime while at the job site, number one. So no difference between people without a background and people with. And then the second thing is that I mentioned earlier, people with criminal backgrounds are actually more likely to stay at their job for longer tenures and be more productive. It's like the facts speak for themselves here. If you look at the most important things to employers, right? It's productivity and tenure. Like those are the most important things for employers. Well, Northwestern University, folks. This is someone I'm going to trust and believe. And one thing I even like to say about this is that includes, everybody in that study had a criminal background. They didn't get to know the individuals in that study, right? So if you take that study, very positive news, and then you even drill down to your employer and say, okay, this candidate, while they were incarcerated, they got this certification, they got this certification, they got this degree. Since they've been out, they were part of this organization, this organization, this organization. And then these three people, have worked with them for the last 6 months, 3 months, 1 year. Well, then that number goes way, way up. And so, for anyone who is doing advocacy work, definitely check out that Northwestern study. I can share with Micheal. I don't know how to get it to everybody, but I share that all the time.
I would say job retention, quality of the job, and also coming from a different perspective as, we're a small business organization. Entrepreneurship is a pathway to economic mobility. So not even trying to get hired, but even starting your own business, there are barriers to that. For example, 1 in 7 jobs in Georgia require an occupational license. There are currently barriers to getting an occupational license as someone who's been justice impacted. If you want to be a cosmetologist or start your own barber shop, you go through this training and you don't recognize that you don't even qualify to get the license until after you've done the training. So there are already barriers in place to even becoming an entrepreneur that need to be addressed. And then in regards to smaller employers looking for quality talent, we hear all of the time in our network, and this is no offense to bigger corporations, but, X corporation, Amazon or whoever, opened down the road and I'm losing employees because they're paying X amount and they offer health insurance. Or they're paying X amount and they have paid time off. A lot of the business owners on our network, like I said, are micro enterprises, less than 10 employees, solo entrepreneurs, or they'll contract out their work. So really making sure we meet people where they're at when it comes to folks that are reentering society, and making it easier for folks to really pursue that entrepreneurship route and reinvest. If someone comes out of the system and starts their own business, what if they were more likely to hire people that were also coming out of the system? So I think the entrepreneurship pathway is also something that needs to be addressed when we're talking about employment, but also making it easier to become an entrepreneur if you are justice impacted as well.
So, Michael, can you ask that question again?
Yes. Ultimately, we just wanted to know about you making your business case to organizations or companies that may be resistant to hiring justice impacted individuals.
Okay. So I want to preface by saying it is not legal for an employer for most employers, there are exceptions, to emphatically outright say, we don't hire anyone with a record. And I've been listening for the last hour and a half, near 2 hours, and I've been sharing this information with returning citizens, their families, and so forth for quite some time, in the course of my professional experience. So before I answer your question, I have to say that when we as employers deny someone employment, there's a nexus between the job that you're applying for. When we deny you employment because of your background, there's a nexus between the job that you're applying for and your criminal history that comes back in your background. So hypothetically, I'm convicted for trafficking cocaine, but I want to get a job at Walmart Pharmacy, CVS. Is that a match? That indicates risk, right? But I applied for a job with Walmart to drive a forklift. What is the nexus between my criminal history of selling cocaine and driving that forklift? There is no nexus. So I really need everyone to understand that. There isn't a nexus. So you share that with your family member. If it's you that need that information, that is how most employers are supposed to make their hiring decisions. when that presents itself. Now, to your question, what I've done to convince an employer, and I've done this in the past, to convince an employer that, hey, one of my employees, hey, we should be opening opportunities to people who have backgrounds. We should not be not hiring people because they have a background. We should make sure that they don't have a nexus to the role. So what I've done, Micheal, in the past is I've went out on the floor and pulled someone that I hired and said, that is the person that you promoted to be a part-time supervisor who had a record. Well, hey, we didn't know that, and I literally done this. Hey, we didn't know that this person, okay, but they're doing a great job. They've been here a year, and this is a business case why we should do it. Well, maybe that was just an anomaly. Oh, okay, well, let me go get another one. So, okay, well, Robert, you've been hiring people like this for how long? Since I've been here. So that's how I've done it. And the only reason I can do that is because employers, the larger employer, and I've worked for them, well, actually Walmart's the largest employer internationally. Especially large employers know that there has to be a nexus between the offense and what you're being hired for. And so when I can bring someone in my prior roles, I have not had the opportunity to do this at Walmart. I only put that disclaimer out there. I don't want to get in trouble. But when I had that opportunity to do that in the past, I've always, hey, here's this business case right here. This person does a wonderful job and you promoted them, him or her. And it's also led us with the opportunity to go to halfway houses and so forth. Let me the opportunity to go to halfway houses and advocate to employ people. So I use a business case of this is who's here. They have this in their background. You don't have a reason not to.
Thank you. For the sake of time, I'm going to ask two more questions before we wrap up. This next question will be for Natasha. We've talked a lot today about how mass incarceration affects everyone, personally as well as economically. We know that everyone loses, but with justice reform, it could be a win-win. In your professional opinion, what will it take to get more companies or trade associations, even industry groups, to understand how justice reform will help individuals, communities, as well as businesses in society?
I think, first of all, it's what you just heard. It's making the business case, right? It has to matter to the business. Of course, many businesses do care about doing the right thing. They might define that differently, but one thing they can all say that they need is talent, right? Even though we've seen mass layoffs for certain companies, hiring hasn't changed. The need for quality talent hasn't changed. So if you can speak to the need that the business has, then you can provide the education they need to understand what exactly needs to be done. What are the other core-related issues that need to be addressed to better serve these businesses through talent, but also to provide jobs for people who have been impacted by the justice system, and to understand that these people have done their time. They should not have, I'm thinking of the poem from like middle school, the albatross, right? They should not live with an albatross around their neck forever. They have so much to offer. They have so much value to bring to your businesses, right? But I do think the first step is to make that business case, as Robert said. Why does it matter to the business? And then getting to that larger issue of why is it the right thing to do? What are the other core-related issues? Because housing, you can't separate. We heard from the last panel, right? Housing, workforce housing is also correlated to providing quality employment for justice-impacted individuals. But I do think it starts with the bottom line. It starts with the business case.
Thank you. This last question will be for Daniel. So in my role as site director at Center for Employment Opportunities, we employ anyone that comes into our program. With that being said, we don't exclude regardless of their conviction. So we see offenses all across the board. With that being said, I would like to know, and I want to ask you a tough question because I think it's important that we ask the hard questions in rooms like this. Why are employers so against working with individuals who have violent or sexual convictions on their records. What do you think is needed to get companies to change their thinking around this issue?
Yeah, sure. Great question. I mean, the short answer is a word that you just shared recently, which is risk, right? And whether it's real risk or perceived risk, to the employer, it's risk. And, particularly in today's society with public relations disaster, if they were to hire someone with that type of background, and if something bad were to happen on site, the PR nightmare would be great. So that's the reason why, is whether it's real or perceived, business might see that as a risk. Second question, how do we address that? How do we go about it? Well, number one, we're never going to convince every single person to change their mind on that. But there's a lot of people who have already changed their mind on that. And so I would focus on finding those right now. The short-term answer is let's focus on those companies that have already opened up their minds and have changed their minds, and look at the data. What has this person done since that conviction? If that is the barrier, I love what you said earlier. You don't need to bring it up in the first interview or the first conversation. But if it comes up, let's talk about what has happened since then. And let's, again, whether you have a background or you do not, when you're interviewing with a company, you need a resume, and then you need references. It's the same regardless of who I'm talking to about a potential job. You need a solid resume. What have you done to get training? What other kind of long-term or longer-term projects have you worked on? And then who can speak to and vouch for you? So I think that's the short-term answer. And then the longer-term answer, again, is what we've been saying, is advocacy, it's storytelling, and connecting both the business case and the data with kind of hearts and minds.
Thank you. Before we conclude, I would be remiss if I didn't take this opportunity. So the last time I believe Justice Day was held in this church was in 2019. Don't quote me on it. COVID has threw off my timeline. I'm sure you all are messed up too when remembering around 2019 and 2020. But I had an opportunity to attend Justice Day. And the reason I was able to attend is because I had a boss who was very flexible, who didn't feel as if my productivity was limited by me being in the office. He gave me an opportunity to attend this Justice Day. This person was Daniel Stinson, who gave me my first chance after I was arrested for possession of a controlled substance. I thought my life was over until I met Daniel. He gave me my second chance. But funny enough, I came to this event. I mentioned that, hey, I had this struggle, and I just wanted to be somebody who helped this community. And I met a lady by the name of Jolie Cooper. She said, I'm going to change your life. Good people deserve to have good jobs, and they should be able to create equity as well. You should think about this organization called Center for Employment Opportunities. Ended up becoming a site director, multi-million-dollar budget, able to help hundreds of people. And I did not have any management experience on my resume. I was worried. But there was a man by the name of Robert Stewart who gave me my first opportunity to be a manager for UPS. So now I have management experience on my resume. Justice Day changed my life. So I just want to thank you two for giving me a chance, because y'all have done more for me than you will ever know. So I attended it, and now I'm on panels. You have increased my platform personally and professionally. So I just want to take the time to thank you as a white man who gets it, and as a black man who I can look up to and be a role model for me as I continue to help other people. But I would not miss the chance to thank you both.
Well, I'm not going to let him get away with that one. So I'm not going to tell my whole story, but I'm going to tell a point in time in my story. A few years ago, I was starting over, and I had realized that I needed to educate myself. And in the course of about 4 years, in my professional life, I've worked unofficially educated more than I have with a conferred education from a university. But while I was doing that, I needed some help. So this is distinguished gentleman that's thanking me. I'm going to thank him. I went to the city of Atlanta to apply for some WIOA dollars. I needed to get a SHRM certification, Society of Human Resource Management Certified Professional for HR, in order to be competitive. And guess who was there to take my application? Yours truly. And so he shared a story with me. I told him, I said, look, this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm going to do, etc. And I remember about a month ago when he asked me to participate, he said, I just want to tell you, you were telling me all these stories. I just want to tell you, I was just shaking my head because I heard it before. And you actually did it. You actually did everything that you said you was going to do. And I want to thank you for that, because he said I'm his greatest success story, but all of us stand on the shoulders of someone else. And though he's much younger than me, I am standing on his shoulder because he helped me to get what I needed to get to where I needed to be. So it's me telling you thank you. And I will thank you by helping everybody else. Okay? All right.
So we're going to conclude the panel. Thank y'all for coming out today. We hope that we were very informative. We hope to connect with you outside of the panel.